The dying room. Hollowbrook Hospital had been shuttered for over a decade, its corridors and wards left to decay. The urban legends that surrounded it painted a grim picture, an abandoned institution haunted by the souls of the damned and a dark curse that had sealed its fate. The stories spoke of a room 666, where the most chilling and unexplained phenomena occurred. Tonight, Dr. Evan Mitchell found himself drawn to this very room by an urgent but mysterious call. The wind howled outside as Evan's car pulled up to the derelict building, rain pelting against the windows. The once grand facade of the hospital loomed like a forgotten monument to suffering, its broken windows and overgrown grounds a stark reminder of its grim past. Evan, a seasoned physician with a history of handling unusual cases, steeled himself as he stepped into the darkened entrance. Inside, the hospital was eerily silent, the kind of silence that presses in on you, making each sound feel magnified. The flickering emergency lights barely illuminated the hallway, casting elongated, jittery shadows that seemed to move with a life of their own. The air was thick with the stench of mold and decay, and every step Evan took stirred up motes of dust that danced in the pale light as he navigated the winding corridors. The old hospital seemed to come alive with strange noises, creaks from the floorboards, distant whispers that seemed to come from nowhere. Evan's flashlight cut through the darkness, its beam trembling slightly as he approached the elevator that would take him to the third floor. The elevator groaned and shuddered as it ascended, its metal walls rattling in protest. When the doors finally opened, Evan found himself in a narrow, dimly lit hallway. Room 666 was at the end, its door slightly ajar. He took a deep breath and approached, the feeling of dread intensifying with each step. Pushing open the door, Evan was greeted by a sight that was both disorienting and chilling. The room was dark, illuminated only by a single, flickering bulb that swung from the ceiling. The walls were stained with dark patches, and the air was frigid. A large, decrepit bed sat in the center of the room, covered with a thin, yellowed sheet. The heart monitor next to the bed beeped irregularly, its rhythm uneven and frantic. On the bed lay a woman who appeared to be in her early 30s. Her face was gaunt, her skin ashen. Her eyes were wide open, staring blankly at the ceiling. Evan approached her, his heart racing with a mixture of apprehension and concern. He checked her vitals and found that they were disturbingly unstable. "Hello," Evan said softly, trying to make contact. "I'm here to help you." The woman's eyes suddenly snapped to focus, and she stared at him with a look of sheer terror. "Help me," she croaked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "They're coming. They won't let me leave." Evan's pulse quickened. He began to adjust the equipment, but the lights flickered wildly, casting erratic, dancing shadows on the walls. The temperature in the room dropped abruptly, and Evan could see his breath forming visible puffs in the freezing air. The shadows seemed to grow darker, more oppressive, and began to move with a sinister purpose. The beeping of the heart monitor grew erratic, its pace quickening in response to the escalating tension. The woman's breathing became labored and irregular. Her eyes darted around the room, as if she could see something Evan could not. The whispers grew louder, an unintelligible murmur that seemed to emanate from the walls themselves. Suddenly, the door slammed shut with a thunderous bang, and the darkness seemed to press in from all sides. The shadows on the walls coalesced into grotesque forms, shifting and twisting as if they were alive. The whispers grew into a cacophony of fear and despair, a chorus of tormented voices that filled the room with a palpable sense of malevolence. Evan tried to reach for the phone to call for help, but it slipped from his grasp and shattered on the floor. The shadows seemed to pulse with a life of their own, their dark tendrils reaching out as if seeking to ensnare him. The heart monitor's beeping became a frantic, irregular staccato, mirroring the woman's escalating distress. The woman's breathing became more ragged, her body convulsing as if she were trying to escape some unseen torment. Her hands clawed at the sheets, her eyes wide with an incomprehensible fear. The shadows moved closer, their forms becoming more distinct and menacing. Desperately, Evan tried to stabilize her with the defibrillator, but the device seemed powerless against the encroaching darkness. The room's temperature dropped further, and Evan felt an overwhelming sense of suffocation, as if the very air were being squeezed out of him. The oppressive darkness seemed to close in on him, and the whispers grew louder, a deafening roar of anguish. In her final moments, the woman's body writhed violently. Her eyes locked onto Evan's with a look of pure terror and pleading. The shadows seemed to consume her, wrapping around her form in a suffocating embrace. Her final screams were a harrowing mix of agony and despair, a cry that seemed to echo through the very fabric of the room. With one last, gut-wrenching scream, the woman's body went limp. The shadows receded slowly, and the room's temperature began to rise. The oppressive darkness lifted, leaving Evan alone with the aftermath of the horror he had witnessed. The beeping of the heart monitor flatlined, and the room was eerily silent once more. Evan stumbled out of room 666, his mind reeling from the traumatic experience. The heavy door shut behind him with a final, decisive thud.
The corridor outside felt almost normal in comparison, though the sense of dread still lingered. As he left Hollowbrook Hospital, the wind howled outside, and the rain continued to pour. The experience in room 666 was etched into his memory, a haunting reminder of the darkness that had claimed yet another victim. The hospital remained a grim testament to its dark history, a place where the echoes of the dying continued to reverberate through its abandoned halls. The trauma of that night would forever haunt Evan, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurked in the abandoned corners of the world, where darkness and despair awaited anyone brave, or foolish, enough to enter. This extended version delves deeper into the traumatic experience, emphasizing the sense of dread and the supernatural elements to create a more intense and unsettling narrative.